This channel might be the closest thing we get to a consistent, oversimplified, I really need this in my life.
It's
this
February
is my serious
1815.
history, February
On a small
1815.
island just off the coast of Italy, Napoleon is staring longingly at the continent
He's about to do one of the most pro-gamer moves ever done in history. He's going to escape from Elba.
once ruled in the distance.
I was
Just a year ago, he'd controlled more
getting a little confused on how to pronounce that island's name, but yes.
of Europe than any man since the height of the Roman Empire. As the Emperor of France, he'd conquered nearly the entire continent.
Look at this map. Look at how much just one dude conquered all of this. Like, France, yeah, bringing France to just unbelievable levels of power.
But now, his empire was reduced to 2 tiny Mediterranean islands, his subjects little more than goats and fishermen. It had taken the combined forces of literally every European nation and a major assist from Mother Nature before Napoleon was finally
The Russian winter. Dude, I still don't really know why the European leaders at this time didn't just execute this dude. I mean, I know there's explanations for it, but man, they must have been thinking when this guy escapes, like, oh, I knew I should have chopped that guy's head off.
defeated in the War of the Sixth Coalition. To prevent him from becoming a martyr, the great powers chose to exile.
There's going to be a 7th coalition, the Battle of Waterloo. This is going to be this is obviously probably the single most big battle, most famous battle when it comes to Napoleonic France.
Napoleon to the tiny island of Elba to live out the rest of his days. He'd be cut off from his people, and he would be given the ultimate punishment for a man of such ambition.
I love that. Okay, we're going to get into it, but the fact that, like, this dude just walked back into France, and all of France was just like, yeah, let's go! One more time. They literally went for like one last joyride. Maybe at the time they weren't thinking, maybe the French people thought that, oh, Napoleon's back, let's start getting these dubs again. So perhaps that's their explanation.
He would be forced to helplessly watch as...
But to me, I can't help but think, like, it was just like one last joyride. Like, they were like, yeah, let's just go die on the battlefield with our homie Napoleon because we really liked that guy.
Europe moved on without him. Upon arriving on Elba, Napoleon had initially resigned himself to his fate and simply planned to improve the island and make it his new home.
That's so funny.
But soon, he begins to receive letters from supporters that make it sound like Europe's having a lot more trouble moving on than they expected. The great powers of the coalition who defeated him have gathered at the Congress of Vienna and are trying to put Europe back together. But without their common enemy, they've begun to turn on each other and squabble.
That's so funny. So he decided to come back, bring them all. It's almost like he was like, yeah, I got you guys. Let's go ahead and bring Europe back into some unity with my presence. That's just president. I don't know.
Over who gets what after beating Napoleon. Meanwhile, back in France, the coalition had placed a new king, Louis XVIII, on the throne.
Why is he drawn so horrifically? It's actually a little disturbing.
But he quickly becomes unpopular by reminding everyone why they got rid of their king in the first place. He's out of touch, and the soldiers who are now not being paid begin to look back.
Man, I really want one of those hats. Every time I see this time period in France, I'm like, dang, how can I buy one of these? I'm sure there's got to be someplace, right? I don't want to buy like a cheap knockoff version with like plastic though. I want the real stuff.
Fondly on the days when
which is going to cost me like thousands, but
Napoleon ruled. Letters pour into Elba, telling Napoleon that if he were to return, the people of France would welcome him with open arms.
It's funny how you can tell that's Napoleon. I'm not sure if it's because of the hat in the background or what it is, but that actually looks like him a bit. Especially with that one picture of him just like on his chair, just like slouched, and he's just like, bro, that is him. That's who we're looking at here.
So as he watches the sunset, Napoleon quietly decides to once again change the course of history. He orders the repair of his ship, the Inconstant, and in the dark of night on Sunday, February 26, 1815, Napoleon and 1,000 of his most loyal soldiers leave.
It's crazy they weren't even really guarding him that much. Like, what were the European powers thinking? Like, yeah, we're just going to let him. I mean, I'm sure they didn't want to let him. They were probably watching him slightly, but it's almost like they wanted this to happen. Did the British were like, yeah, let's go ahead and give this guy a chance to just come on back because that'd be a funny little bit of trolling.
Elba and set sail for the European coast.
Bro.
The Corsican monster, the nightmare that had terrorized
Corsican monster because he's from Corsica, which that's where the whole big old debate is Napoleon actually French or is he Italian?
Europe for nearly
just like how Stalin is from Georgia and the certain mustache man is from Austria.
Nearly 2 decades is en route back to France.
I think this is a little bit more. Yeah, that whole conversation about where famous leaders are actually from, there's no debate that the skinny mustache man is from Austria and that Stalin is Georgian.
On March 7th, Metternich, the acting head of the Congress of Vienna, is awakened in the middle of the night with an urgent message from Elba. Upon hearing the report, a chill runs down his spine. Napoleon is missing. Within the hour.
Why would you let it be that easy? Obviously, they learn when they exile him again to St. Helena, the island in the middle of the freaking Atlantic Ocean, but why would you put him off? I get he's like, from kind of Italy, Corsica at least, but bro, why would you put him there? Bro, why would you not just put him in the guillotine himself? Cut his head off.
He gathers the leaders of Europe together and shares the news, and the Congress of Vienna immediately falls
I
into
love
chaos.
seeing these famous European leaders in their little pajamas and things like that. What did they wear for pajamas? Bro, I would have been out there in the nude if I was one of these. Nah, that's too much. Nah, Drew, chill.
Everyone begins to panic and point fingers at each other.
I do not sleep in the nude, by the way. But I know there's probably certain leaders currently right now that maybe do.
The English are blamed for letting him escape. The French for not providing Napoleon.
I would blame the English, to be honest. Sorry, England, but I'm blaming y'all. This was your whole idea. This was your operation.
Napoleon's promised allowance. The Russians are considered as potential turncoats. But in the end, it does not matter. The greatest threat to Europe has returned.
I love that a single man caused this much fear throughout all of Europe. It took so many countries to come together to beat this guy. And the Napoleonic ideas would continue to make a massive impact on Europe even after he was, exiled again and dies and stuff like that.
And all they can do is prepare for war. On March 1st, Napoleon sets foot onto French soil for the first time in 300 days and begins his march to Paris.
A full year.
The king orders the 5th Regiment to find Napoleon and stop him, using lethal force if necessary. They meet just...
Yeah, I'm thinking of this famous painting. Doesn't he have his hand up? He's just like, no, bro, don't do it. Because they're pointing at him.
Just outside of the town of Grenoble, and the 5th stands in formation on the road, blocking the emperor's path. Napoleon's guard ready their weapons, and the two armies size each other up. The king's soldiers stare down the barrels of their guns, locked on the man who had ruled them all less than a year ago.
That's what I was going to say.
Napoleon steps forward, holds out his arms, and shouts, "Here I am! Kill your emperor, if you wish!" Nobody moves, and the silence is
Bro,
deafening.
this is so great.
The men on
This is
both
such a great
sides
scene.
stand nervously with their weapons at the ready. Finally, after what seems like an eternity, a member of the 5th Regiment lowers his rifle. One by one, the French soldiers follow his lead. Someone in formation
So
shouts
epic.
out, "Long live the Emperor!" And this call is quickly answered with a resounding reply from every soldier on both sides of the standoff.
Incredible. One thing that I think about when I just saw this scene right here is what really must feel very impactful is that obviously he's not speaking English. He is speaking French to his French soldiers. So obviously this, whatever he says in French. I just feel like that's got to make such a big impact on you. If I'm a French soldier and the former French leader comes to me right here, hands up in the air, he speaks my own language. I think that's key. I think that's got to be a special part of it.
Long live the Emperor!
I wouldn't be able to shoot him either. I mean, dang. I mean, especially there's just something with human beings. Even if these people ended up hating Napoleon by the end of his reign, who knows what the last 300 days had brought to France and to the rest of the European continent. It doesn't surprise me at all that these people were like, you know what? One final ride. Why not?
All shout in unison. The 5th Regiment throws down their weapons and rush to Napoleon with arms raised
That's so
victoriously
awesome.
in the air.
They all tackle
They shake hands with Napoleon's guard, and together they all celebrate his long-awaited return.
That's so crazy.
Napoleon's now larger rebel army continued its march to
I'm thinking about Napoleon III now, which really was very different than Napoleon. But yeah, they'll get another Napoleon even after this one gets exiled.
Paris.
I don't think they're going to like him quite as much. He also has kind of a mixed history. This also sends me down the rabbit hole of the whole debate, was Napoleon the 19th century version of Hitler? I don't think so, but he does have a very checkered past. I mean, it's easy to look back at this 200 and almost 25 years later, and everyone's just kind of like, where is the line where it's the amount of deaths that this person caused, when do we just kind of look at him as just a historical figure? Media definitely help with that. Movies, video games, where people are just kind of oh yeah, that was that one guy. Yeah, I guess he's cool because he's just more normalized, I guess, now.
Over the next 20 days, 12,000 more soldiers would be sent out by King Louis to capture Napoleon.
And none of them.
And they would all immediately defect to join him.
Of course.
As the news spreads
so
throughout
funny.
Europe, the Congress of Vienna realizes they must put aside their differences and again work together if an independent Europe
This is the biggest blessing in disguise, though. Like, some of them had to have known that. Even though they might have been freaked out a little bit, I'm sure they were. In the back of one of their heads, it's like, well, you know, it's like the alien invasion thing that I always talk about. Like, that's the one thing. If you want to pull the Earth together here in 2025, we need aliens to come down and invade, because there's going to be nobody more down and happy than all the countries in the world to be like, you know what, fighting side by side, doesn't matter who our enemies are. The Americans, Russians, Chinese, Indians, we're all going to be fighting side by side against these invading forces. So that's got to be in the back of one of their heads, or all of their heads. Like, at least Napoleon's here to unify us once again.
survive. On Monday, March 13th, Napoleon is declared an
Dead
outlaw
or
by the
alive.
nations of Austria, Great Britain, Prussia, and Russia.
I love that picture of him. He's just like, yeah, oh, of course this guy's going to have to escape.
More and more of the French army defecting to the former emperor, King Louis runs away to Belgium, and on March 20th, just 20 days after his arrival, Napoleon marches into Paris unopposed.
That's so funny.
The city erupts into celebration.
Imagine being the king, and you're trying to stop this guy, and I'm just trying to keep power, right? I'm the French king. I just don't want this guy to come back. And every single division, every single regiment I send to execute that guy, capture him, imprison him, whatever, they just keep defecting. And like the more people I send after him, the stronger he gets. It's like, what are you really supposed to do? Of course, the king was just gonna have to run away to Belgium.
He takes the throne
I
without
probably wouldn't run to
firing a
Belgium.
single bullet. The emperor has returned.
It's so funny. That must have been so lit. Does anyone realize how lit that must have been to be in like, bam, like Napoleon takes his throne again in his like epic hall. Everyone must have been like, he busts out the wine. We're French, we're drinking wine all the time.
Oh my God! The emperor has returned.
Yeah, probably.
On March 25th, the Congress of Vienna
He's
ratified
got glass in his face. That's funny.
the Treaty of Alliance against Napoleon. Each of the four great powers promise 150,000 men for the fight. No more half measures. Napoleon.
What? It's just incredible what this man was able to do. One dude causing all like the de facto strongest powers in the world all have to work together. I mean, I'm not sure exactly how fearful they were. They probably were extremely fearful, but this animation's really playing that up, really amping that up.
Must be defeated decisively once and for all, and they begin to draw up plans for a July 1st invasion of France. 2 European armies are quickly assembled in Belgium near the French border to defend against a possible invasion. A British army is led by Arthur Wellesley, the Duke of Wellington, who commands a ragtag group of 92,000 Dutch,
He's
English,
famous.
and German troops, and a Prussian army that's led by Marshal von Blücher with around 120.
What a ridiculous force that Napoleon's gonna have to fight. I mean, geez.
21,000 Prussian soldiers. Both commanders are hardened veterans of the Napoleonic Wars.
Oh, yeah.
They know their enemy, and they're trusted with the unenviable task of holding off the emperor as long as possible to give the rest of the coalition time to rally their armies. Back in France, Napoleon's quickly put together a new French army of 124,000 troops.
Man, they're so outnumbered. They are so ridiculously outnumbered. It really just goes to show that maybe the French people at this time were just like, frick it, we're going to take a giant L here. But you know what? I'm going to go down with my homie Napoleon. Because, I mean, up until that point, the French had never been stronger. I mean, dang. I'm trying to put myself into these perspectives. Maybe I would have done it too.
He hears of the planned Allied invasion and of the 2 armies already stationed in Belgium. He realizes he must quickly make a choice. He can continue to rebuild his army and defend against the coming invasion.
It's also very, very important to note the previous history of France right before Napoleon took power. The French Revolution, the massive embarrassment the French felt after losing the 7 Years' War to the British Empire. They just wanted revenge, honestly, on the Brits, which is why they helped America get their independence. But then you finally have Napoleon come in, give you a sense of pride again, make you become the world's, biggest power, basically the number one threat to the world, at least having the number one army threat. They never really had the Navy part down, but that must have felt liberating. That must have felt like finally the French can take up our rightful claim as whatever the world's strongest power. Like Then they get rid of that guy. You're like, oh, we have to be sucky in French again. And not to say that, I'm just saying that, France wasn't doing all that good before the Napoleonic era. So it's like, here we go, back to normal old France. So of course they're going to rejoin this dude.
Or he can go on the offense and knock out the English and Prussian armies now. If he destroys both armies, there's a chance he can force the coalition into a peace treaty where he remains the ruler of France. And so he chooses to go on the offense and strike now.
If only this dude figured out boats. If only he could figure out boats. I mean, that's, dang. Being able to sail across the English Channel, take London, then France probably would have just ruled forever.
He knows
not forever, but a long time.
Combined British and Prussian army would outnumber his men 2-1. But he has a plan. The two allied armies are still separated. If he moves quickly, he can drive his army in between them, cut them off from each other, and take them out one at a time. But this plan means he must move immediately. If he delays any further, Wellington and Blücher will coordinate and fortify their positions together. So Napoleon takes his army and boldly crosses the border into Belgium on June 15th. And then I said, well,
June 15th.
Prussians are the first to encounter Napoleon's men and are shocked at his speed of movement. They try to hold them back, but they are
this feels like a video game. Oh, I'm loving this look.
Unprepared and ultimately fail. The British are warned, and the Duke of Wellington and Blücher quickly begin their preparation.
Very underrated general, Duke of Wellington. I mean, when it comes to a historical standpoint, he doesn't get put in there with like some of the greats of all time. Alexander the Great, of course, Napoleon is up there, but Duke of Wellington deserves a whole bunch.
For their
I mean, if he loses this, well, Napoleon is back. And he might be back for good.
Inevitable date with the Demon of France. They both know from experience that Napoleon...
The Demon of France, is that what they actually called him? I would not be surprised if that was the terminology they used in at least the UK.
Will not give them time to prepare. Within 24 hours, they'll be forced once again into battle against the greatest general of their lifetime. The next day, Napoleon makes his move. He divides his men and places half his army under the command of the man he had called the bravest of the brave, Field Marshal Michel Ney, and gives him orders to capture the British held town of Quatre. At the same time, he personally takes the remainder of his men and marches toward the small village of Ligny to engage the Prussians. With lightning speed.
Like, it's so funny how often Belgium truly is, just like the memes say, the speed bump of Europe. Like, you can go back to the Napoleonic times, and this region of Europe is known as the speed bump. Now, part of it is the geography. It's more flat there. You have the Alps to the south. Usually it's due to like French and German fighting, which the Prussians are involved in this. So, you can classify that as the same thing here. But
speed. Napoleon moves his men into position and waits. At 2:30 p.m., he finally hears cannon fire coming from Quatre. Ney has begun his assault, so in turn, he gives the command to attack. French cannons open fire on the Prussians, and his troops rush into battle. Fighting engulfs the streets of Ligny. Homes and buildings are quickly stormed and used as defensive positions. The townspeople trapped in the crossfire can do nothing but cover their eyes and ears and hold their children close as carnage erupts.
I love how horrific these drawings are. Like, everyone has got to be very scary looking. Also, I mean, the teeth are probably accurate. Everyone probably has teeth like this in these times. There's not like dentistry just everywhere in 1815.
All around them. The Prussians fight bitterly, but Napoleon's army is like an unstoppable force of nature. By the end of the day, 16,000 Prussian soldiers are dead, and those still alive are forced to retreat.
16,000 out of the 100. That's not like a terrible number, but because they start off with 100,000, right, or 150,000. But still, losing 16,000 in like a moment is pretty bad. I don't blame them for retreating.
Killed in the battle after his horse is shot out from under him, but he somehow survives.
Ooh.
And can I just stop here for just a second and point out that Blücher was 72 years old at this battle.
Damn!
He's literally a grandpa out there leading cavalry charges against the world's greatest general.
That's
what
funny.
a Chad. Anyway,
he's been through a lot. He's probably a pretty wise man. I wouldn't be too hesitant to ride into battle with a 72-year-old. I mean, that guy's seen some stuff. He's seen the American Revolution. He's seen, if he's 72 in 1815, then he's seen the 7 Years' War, even, right? Barely. Yeah, he did, but he was really like a kid.
Blücher's generals push for a full retreat, but he refuses. He must remain close to help the Duke of Wellington when the time comes. This he had promised. So instead, he regroups his army to the north just 18 miles away. He'll risk the lives of all of his men to keep his word. At Quatre, Ney has less luck against the British. He had hesitated, and this delay had allowed his enemy time to fully fortify their positions. He has more men.
This feels like a video game. I really want to play this video game with these horrific looking faces and things like this. It's kind of incredible that the fear of Napoleon was so huge, which is not surprising. This is the 7th coalition. So, of course, at this point, you know, all of Europe feels like Napoleon is like the greatest threat to the entire continent and the world. But it's incredible that these countries were able to work together as much as they did. Whether the English and the Prussians, the Austrians, the Russians, like you would think that they'd eventually want to like somewhat backstab each other if it meant like, you know, maybe kind of like, hey, screw Britain, I'm going to leave them out there on their own. I'm going to save my men. But no, the Prussian was willing to sacrifice his own dudes.
But they're now running straight into heavy defensive fire, and wave after wave.
Because like in the very beginning, maybe the 3rd coalition, the 4th coalition, which maybe is why they failed so many times in the very early days. But in the very beginning, I probably would be like, you know, I don't really like the Brits. Like, I think I'll tell them I'm going to reinforce, but you know what? I'm actually not going to.
Wave of his soldiers died.
At this point, yeah, it's been 7 coalitions. I need to keep my word because this Napoleon guy just does not go away.
Trying to take the town. As the sun sets, the Duke of Wellington's forces have successfully stopped Ney's advance. In the cover of night, the British safely retreat to Waterloo, while a disgruntled Marshal Ney slinks back to Napoleon. Now, Ney had failed to crush the British forces at Quatre, but he did manage to keep them separated from the Prussians. Phase 1 of Napoleon's plan had still worked, and they can now use the full power of the French army to crush each of their enemies one at a time.
If only everyone didn't just despise France. If France could have just got one ally, you know, that would have been nice, but no.
But Napoleon received...
Well, he did in the earlier coalitions. He had some friends, but yeah.
...receives a report that some of the Prussians are still nearby. If they reach the British and combine their forces, the battle will become much more difficult. He cannot allow this to happen. So he draws up plans to attack Wellington immediately. He will crush the British army before Blücher and the Prussians have any hope of saving them. The fate of Europe will come down to a race against time. And this final decisive battle will happen on Sunday, June 18th, 1815, at a place called Waterloo.
No wonder the Brits love... I feel like this is the #1 battle the Brits love to bring up. Over World War I, over World War II, it's the Battle of Waterloo, which is probably their most prideful conflict event, basically, their final stand. Waterloo.
Following Quatre, the Duke of Wellington...
Why am I thinking of that one video where the guy's like, he says, he gets in a taxi and he says Waterloo, and the taxi driver says, what does he say? Right now? And then like the guy jokingly says, no, 1815, I'm butchering it, but 1815.
And his men scrambled.
I don't mean 1815 or whatever. I don't know. I'm butchering this joke.
To fortify defensive positions near a ridge in an area just south of a tiny village called Waterloo. His army is a ragtag group of inexperienced Germans, Dutch, and Belgian soldiers who have joined his elite British troops.
That's funny.
In response to the news of Napoleon's return...
It's also very impressive for the Brits because this is an army battle. It's one of the only times, one of the most famous examples of where the Brits could not rely on their massive navies. So that I think that's part of the reason why it's so prideful and often talked about.
Were assembled at the last minute by the coalition. It was the best they could do with such limited time, and this army of green recruits is all Wellington has to work with to try to stop the world's greatest general and his army of seasoned veterans. They turned 3 farmhouses into makeshift forts. Hougoumont to the right, La Haye Sainte to the center, and Papillote to the left. Each one is filled with elite British troops. Blücher sends word to Wellington that they're coming to join him in battle, but they are still hours away.
Dang.
The British will be on their own until their arrival, but if they can hold on, they can win. After Ligny, Napoleon assumes the main Prussian force has been neutralized, buying him more than enough time to finish off Wellington and his men. But just as a precaution, he sends out a third of his army to find the remaining Prussian units and wipe them out before they can join up with Wellington. The night of June 17th is an uneasy one for everyone.
Well, obviously it was going to be a terrible mistake because we know the results. No spoilers, though.
As if mourning the death and destruction to come, the skies open up and a thunderstorm soaks the ground overnight. The sky is clear by morning, but much of the land between Napoleon's position and the British fortifications has been turned into a thick sea of mud. Wow. Napoleon, who wanted to attack at 9 a.m., now waits hours for the sun to dry the ground before he begins his advance toward...
Man, That's so crazy. It's funny how some of the greatest generals, like, they have incredible attention to detail. Like, I wouldn't be able to do it. Napoleon here, like so many examples of why he was such a great general, is he has insane level of detail. He's always able to think about, things that probably a lot of other people wouldn't. So, like, it is cool. It is probably a good idea to think about, oh, yeah, we probably shouldn't attack when the land's all muddy. However, this is going to be the mistake here in this example.
Towards the British position. No matter, he's
what the heck was he just like
to
popping?
dry the ground before he begins his advance towards the British
It's ibuprofen
position.
Okay. I was just wondering. I don't know what he was popping for a second.
No matter, he's still confident that the Prussians are broken, and his men will wipe the inexperienced British out in no time.
I mean, the Prussians got hit pretty bad, but they're definitely not broken.
Upon their arrival at the battlefield, the French soldiers disperse into their proper formations, and finally, at 11 a.m., Napoleon gives the signal. His men launch their first attack to the right on Hougoumont. Cannon fire breaks the silence of the midday as French troops storm the farmhouse.
This guy's already bleeding. Look at that. How do you get that? I guess this is from like debris or something ricocheting off, getting like a little bit of metal over here. He's lucky he didn't get hit in the eye.
The plan
this
is
guy's
to
probably
force
gonna die.
Wellington's hand and make him take troops from his center formation to reinforce his right. But the Allied troops at Hougoumont fight back with everything they got, and Napoleon's men begin to take heavy losses as they approach the farmhouse. Wellington calmly observes from a distance, and he does not commit any further reinforcements from his center. Napoleon's first move has been countered, so he answers with increased violence. At noon, Napoleon sends a volley of cannon fire at the English center and sends his troops to take La Haye Sainte. The Allied forces grip their bayonets and watch as the French column of death slowly marches towards them, their steps shaking the ground as they scream, "Vive l'Empereur! Long live the Emperor!" Napoleon's forces charge the
It's funny. I don't think a lot of those British soldiers had no idea what the French were screaming. You're just hearing like angry French noises.
Position and the fighting quick.
I like how like the French side have the same like faces that are used with the British side. Like you can see this guy.
Napoleon's forces
certain faces are reused. The Brits always have this face, which is, I don't know, that's just kind of funny.
The position
Reminds
and
me
the
of the
fighting
British berry meme. They're all berries.
Quickly devolves into violence at a horrific scale. Bayonets and fists become the weapons of last resort as the defenders close ranks. The British are pushed back further and further until Wellington finally counterpunches by sending his elite cavalry into the fray. They smash into the French infantry and they begin to scatter. Filled with confidence, the horse riders follow in hot pursuit, easily cutting down French soldiers as they retreat. But in their excitement, the British cavalry overextend themselves and ride into range of Napoleon's cannons. A brutal cannon barrage rips horses and riders apart. Napoleon signals for his elite lancers to charge, and they make quick work of the now stranded British cavalry. Without the cavalry support, the English infantry are now undefended on their flanks, and they're slowly succumbing to Napoleon's forces. The Emperor smiles grimly.
Oh man, look at that sweat dripping down his face. This is getting intense. This is like American anime right now. I don't know if this channel is based. It sounds like it's not AI generated, and he has an American accent. This is really American anime we're watching right now because it's history too related. I don't know why. It feels like American anime would be based more around history.
Sensing that victory is near, he's contemplating his next attack when out of the corner of his eye, he spots something in the distance. He grabs his spyglass to investigate and cannot believe what he sees. The army he had sent out to slow the Prussians has failed, and they're now charging towards the battlefield. He's now on the clock, and he must wipe out the British before the Prussians arrive. Napoleon lowers the spyglass and clutches his stomach in pain. He'd been suffering throughout the battle with some sort of infection, and the pain had increased to an intolerable level despite the laudanum he'd been taking. He decides to take
I don't know, man. I don't know. This sounds like a whole lot of excuses over here. This is him being exiled to St. Helena, and he's like talking to one of the British guards, like, "Yo, if I didn't have that stomach pain that day, I would have totally kicked your guys' ass."
Take a break and rest up for the final confrontation, and places his trusted marshal, Michel Ney, in charge while he.
That sounds a little too perfect there, Napoleon. Are we sure about that? Do we have data that says that? Also, the French to honor Napoleon would make sense for them to like back that up, to be like, yeah, that's what happened. That's the only reason why we lost, because that dude he ate some weird like Taco Bell in the morning, and that's the reason why we didn't win.
Lies down. Upon assuming command, Ney sees what he believes to be weakened British infantry formations pulling back over the ridge. They're running! He can crush them now if he acts quickly. So, without consulting Napoleon, he personally leads a massive cavalry charge up the hill towards the retreating British infantry on the ridge. Wellington sees 9,000 elite French cavalry storming directly towards his position and is forced to think fast. He turns and orders the infantry on the ridge to form up into hollow square formations, with every man pointing his weapon outward. The British soldiers frantically race into position as the thunderous roar of the stampeding French cavalry grows louder and louder. The ground beneath the British begins to shake as Ney's cavalry finally crest the hill, and upon sight, the Allied formations open fire. The French riders try to smash into the British formations, but their horses defy the orders and refuse to charge into the hedge of bayonet blades. They instead race around the squares like water flowing around rocks in a stream. The French soldiers are picked apart by the British, who are now firing at them from...
What a fantastic last-minute move. I'm wondering if he had this up his sleeve for a while. I would assume so. It seems a little bit too perfect. But, yeah, this is a great final trump card to use to ultimately bring an end to Napoleonic France.
Every direction. Ney continues to send waves of cavalry over the hill, and every wave of cavalry meets the same gruesome fate. Eventually, the French riders are forced to pull back, having won nothing and suffering massive casualties. The Prussians continue racing towards the battlefield, and Napoleon now realizes he has just an hour or two at most before all hope of victory is lost.
How long was it taking for them to move? 1 hour? I mean, I know it's a huge group of men you're trying to move, but 1 hour? I mean, yeah, I guess they're trying to stay in formation too.
He urges his men to fight on, but the unfamiliar feeling of desperation...
You probably don't want them to run because you need them to have, you know, whatever energy for the battle, so you gotta kind of have them kind of walk a little bit slowly all together.
...begins to crack his invincible will. Finally, the French take the farmhouse of Les Saintes, and Napoleon quickly pushes his cannons forward. From this position, he fires on the British at close range, punching a hole right through the Allied center. Though Wellington's army had exceeded all expectations, Napoleon was still Napoleon. He's the greatest general of their time, and the Allied defense is now on the brink of collapse. As his men continue to fall...
So his stomach pain just magically went away? Now that the worst travesty has happened to his army, it's like, oh, I'm back now. Let's start fighting again.
Wellington looks west to the setting sun. If he can just hold out a little longer, they may be saved by nightfall. But suddenly, he hears soldiers to his left erupt into cheers. His head snaps in their direction, and he sees Blücher has made good on his word. Though they're late, the Prussians have arrived at Waterloo.
A Prussian is never late. He arrives exactly when he means to.
Blücher's army smashes...
Maybe. The blessing in disguise. Maybe the Prussians did want the Brits to take heavy losses before they did actually show up and get the reinforcements.
...into Napoleon's eastern flank, and the French emperor is forced to divert troops to defend his position. Now surrounded on three...
running backwards. I thought it was like a Prussian that was like running into battle, but backwards.
And the French emperor is forced to divert troops to defend his position. Now surrounded on three sides, he's fighting purely...
Okay, that guy, there's certain people that don't look... Like this guy in the background almost looks like a samurai or something.
...survival. And it's at this point Napoleon plays his final move, his trump card that he's kept close to the best.
His actual trump card. I used that same phrase too.
Only to be used in the direst of circumstances. He gives the order for his Imperial Guard to attack. Made up of entirely elite veterans, this unit was the crown jewel of Napoleon's army. Just their name alone would strike fear into the hearts of the enemies of France. And
what is this? The Royal Grande, I don't know the French word, but I think I know the words for these.
They were now marching directly towards the British position. The Allied troops fire into the Imperial Guard, trying to stop them, but undaunted, they continue their march up the hill towards Wellington's men. Ready for the bloody fight to come, the first of Napoleon's elite soldiers crest the hill, but they're surprised to find not one British soldier there. It's eerily quiet, and as the rest of the guard join them on the hill, they are equally confused. As they survey the land...
Is that like a cornfield or what? I guess that's just grass, but yeah, these guys clearly about to get massacred. I hope we get a little bit into... We probably will, but his second exile into St. Helena and things like that.
And searching for the enemy, a cry breaks the silence. "Now, Maitland! Now's your time!" Wellington...
Nice British accent. Accurate. He would have had an accent like that, yes.
Shouts. On command, Sir Peregrine Maitland and his 1,500 troops, who had hidden themselves in the tall grass, stand and begin...
In the tall grass, just like a Pokemon. That's crazy. You definitely don't want to catch those British soldiers.
Opening fire on the startled French soldiers. The British had positioned themselves in a long, thin line to ensure every soldier had a clear shot. And at this close of a range, they didn't miss. It's a literal firing squad, and the Imperial Guard is ripped apart.
Dang.
The remains of the shocked guard attempt to fight back, but they're quickly met by a bayonet charge. And it's at this moment that the most legendary unit of Napoleon's Grand Army does something they had never done before.
Oh, they run?
They turn and begin to run. The sight
crazy.
of the Imperial Guard running for their lives
Well, that might just have been the final straw. Like, they knew that this was going to be a losing battle, and they're like, yeah, Napoleon's done. We don't got to worry about, we're not worried about our pride anymore. Let's just stay alive.
It's the will of Napoleon's men. If the best troops think this battle is lost, it most certainly is.
Yep.
Panic sweeps through the entire French army, and they all begin to flee. Wellington orders...
That's your number one thing as a general. You do not want that panic to set in. You know, you don't want people, once people start running away. Then it's also going to be, that's the problem, is like, when you start running like that, it's going to be real easy to oof you. Maybe they're going to do it with cavalry units right now.
A counterattack, and British, Belgian, German, and Dutch troops stream down the hill towards Napoleon's position. The Prussians push in from the east, and Napoleon realizes the day is lost. He retreats. At 9 p.m., Wellington and Blücher embrace on the battlefield, having pulled off the impossible.
Crazy.
Together, they've vanquished the nightmare that has plagued Europe for...
Certainly a big aspect to this, is it's a big, maybe the biggest British army win in their history. That's nothing to do with their navy, which their navy is what is the thing that probably made them the most powerful in the world for so long.
Nearly 2 decades. Napoleon returns...
Wait, in 2 decades?
Wellington and Blücher embrace on the battlefield, having pulled off the impossible. Together, they've vanquished the nightmare that has plagued Europe for nearly 2 decades.
Yeah.
Napoleon returns to Paris, hoping to raise another army, but the loss at Waterloo had turned his people against him. His second reign as Emperor of France is done. It had lasted just 100 days. He's forced to abdicate the throne for a second time and is once again exiled, this time to the remote island of St. Helena. Here, on a tiny island off the coast of Africa, Napoleon lives out the rest of his life, fiercely guarded to ensure he will never escape to terrorize Europe again. Thanks to
absolutely crazy. That's why I think the memes were so popular a couple months back or a year ago. There's nothing we can do. Imagine being Napoleon, exiled again for the second time. This time, even more isolated. You're just in St. Helena, being guarded. And he lives for a couple more years. I can't imagine the things that must have ran through his head. I mean, he didn't even like Elba. Of course, he wanted to go back to the throne, take the throne. I mean, he tried to embrace it. He couldn't do it. I think that his memories, his losses here, it must have honestly haunted him. He must have haunted the guy. I'm surprised he didn't die earlier because of the shame he must have felt.
The heroics of the Duke of Wellington and Blücher, Europe enjoys a relative peace that lasts for nearly 100 years. This peace brings about the Industrial Revolution and technological...
Massive wars definitely do not take place on the same scale of the Napoleonic Wars until World War I. I agree. But yeah, there's a couple of wars that, not even a couple, there's lots. There's the British and French working together, the Crimean Wars with the Ottomans against the Russians. There's obviously a very big one, the Franco-Prussian War, that happens again that ultimately sees the unification of Germany. There's little things going on, but yeah, probably not on the same scale.
Breakthroughs would transform the world into one that's complete.
A little scary how often there's like massive world battles that take place in the earlier parts of a new century. We're here 25 years into our new century. We haven't seen a massive, too big of a battle yet, so that's kind of nice. But yeah, definitely in the 19th century and the 20th century with the Napoleonic Wars and then the 2 world wars. 1700s, there was some kind of big battles, but nothing on those scales, I would say.
Completely
Depends on what you want to discuss.
Recognizable to Napoleon and his opponents at Waterloo. Thanks to its rich deposits of iron and coal, Prussia would quickly become one of the most powerful nations in Europe and eventually evolve into the mighty German Empire. And at the dawn of the 20th century, this empire would field the most terrifying army the world had ever seen. It would soon be their turn to fight against a coalition of nations in a war so catastrophic, it would eventually engulf the entire world.
It's funny how often it just comes down to a war between Germany and France that really engulfs the entire world. Like at the core, at so many core world wars, even the 7 Years' War, I mentioned that earlier. It's all Prussia and France fighting, but how many conflicts are we going to see where Prussia, the de facto Germany, and France basically drag in everyone with obviously like this, I don't want to say the side character, but Britain obviously loves to take place in that. Britain cannot afford either power to get too big, so that's why Britain always has to insert themselves. Usually, I guess they didn't insert themselves in the Franco-Prussian War, but they watched it very closely. But it's pretty amazing. Best part of Napoleon's return to power were the newspapers and how they portrayed him the closer he got to Paris. 9th, he's quitting. The 10th, these are some interesting monsters. Oh, did things begin to switch? Bonaparte is only 6 leagues away from the capital. Bonaparte is advancing. Napoleon will tomorrow be under our ramparts. His Majesty will... Oh, yeah, I see. Yeah, so things very quickly change. Oversimplified simplifies history. Serious history. Detailed history. Paprika simplifies history a lot more. Never thought I would see Napoleon promote Raycon. Once again, an advert worth watching. Man, serious history. You've got me over here. See, this is a very... I'm really liking this channel. I'm really excited to see where this channel goes. I've been watching it very closely. That was a great breakdown of the Battle of Waterloo. He's got a whole bunch of other good stuff. I definitely go recommend checking out more here. I'll see you next time. Big old thanks to my patrons over at Patreon. Come out here calling bro a history expert. Tambre, Drew's Argentinian Trust Fund, NordTyrol, Nolan, Miglu the Goat, LuxembourgLover, KirinoIsBestGirl, KingBearHaze, Fredrik Tibblin, DOOCHBAGGINS, Pavlik, Carmel Saida, AlexandertheTerrible. If you'd like your name here, check out that link in the description down below to patreon.com.